Okay, we're back trying to work on our Roundhouse Boxcab diesel, and we encountered some gear slippage issues, and interestingly it seems to come from the main drive axles, and there's two of them. This one's out of the truck. This is the truck, and this is the other truck. It's still inside. And this gear housing or gear tower sits in the middle. The motor's on top, and that motor spins this wheel this way, and that goes across two universal type couplers and spins these shafts. So what happened is these little cross pieces are what the universals grab onto, and let's show this closer to the camera, and they were just slipping on the axle. Now it wasn't slipping immediately. It's possible that when I put the oil in, they started to slip. Now, does that mean you shouldn't oil it? No. But what would happen? What would cause that? And the thing that would cause that is these are engineering type of plastics. They get old, they lose their elasticity, and otherwise this was a press fit. So how do we fix that now that we we want to still use those pieces, because it would not be easy to fabricate them? And the thing to do is clean them with alcohol. And this is some alcohol I've had forever for model train purposes. And we want to put that alcohol on to get any grease residue out. And then we're going to have to put these pieces back on using a cyanoacrylic type of glue. In this case we're going to use super glue. We also want to make sure there's no grease on here, because if there is grease on there, it will not. This cyanoacrylic glue will not work. Just getting a new Q-tip. Swig of coffee, and we're back. So yeah, we got to use the alcohol because it's a pretty good cleaner, and it's it's relatively safe because it's going to evaporate. Now this one is not out of the box, meaning out of the truck, but we're not going to take this apart, since I really believe now this is the culprit. No need to disassemble it any further. Let that alcohol really get in there. You want to let that dry. While that dries, we're going to reassemble this to put them back in. Now, if we take that main housing, we'll notice that there's two larger holes here. And if you look up close with this, you'll see this has a piece that's jutting up on the top. That obviously has to go into this hole, so it's going to go that way. Therefore, when we put this one together, we've got to make sure that lines up. So, alright, we've got our wheels in there. We know this is going to go this way and sit on there, because as this spins, as the worm spins in one direction, perpendicular to that, the gears will spin. Now this is the $1 million piece to put in, because this will reestablish this as a housed unit. It's supposed to pop in, but you know, just things are supposed to do stuff doesn't mean it's going to happen. Ooh. Love it when things work. Well, not completely though. See, she's riding a little high on that part, which means it's not in perfectly. I don't know, that's like a magic desk. Things will have to roll off it. Must be like a wormhole or a black hole or something. Nope. Snapped in wrong. That's worse. Ah. Little lift, tug. Alright, now she's back together. Now we know they're going to face each other. And then there's the top of the housing. Now, fascinating to me is that these housings seem to be identical either way. They're probably not, but they certainly look identical. That always can be tricky. I'm going to put this together upside down, because otherwise that piece slides off. Wow. Not easy. But it's not that hard either. The main thing with model trains is your skills get better, but you've got to be patient. Because if you're not patient, this just doesn't work. Now, model trains don't necessarily, see that? Don't necessarily transfer to everything else, but the skills transfer to a lot of things. Like, for example, let's say you have an aquarium. You know, the technical things and whatnot, you might learn mechanical, whatever. But, you know, with living things, you got to pay attention to them all the time. You know, the trains, you could put them away, forget about them for a while, and nothing bad's going to happen. Because they're not living. You know, living things, you got to take care of them right away. So the advantage of a toy train hobby is, you know, when you get tired of it, which with me doesn't really happen, but if you do, you need a break, nothing's going to go wrong with it. Just sit there and wait for you. Ah, now it's back. Both pieces are aligned. Beautiful. Now you'll notice that, unlike a real train, these things will not roll because of the transverse gear. Bigger trains, like Lionel, the old ones, the motor's rotating in the same plane as the main gears and the wheels, and it can roll. And that's also true on large real trains. The gears usually they don't do this transverse thing, because you know, you could, with a real train, you stop and they just rip the gears up. So this is not prototypical, but it works in miniature. Okay, these things are probably dry now. So how are we going to do this? Because we don't want to get the crazy glue onto that shaft in the wrong spot, because if it gets down to the housing, well, then we got to clean it off. Now it's easy. How do you get rid of crazy glue? If you get it on, and now it locked up a piece. Well, at this level, the easiest way to do it is, believe it or not, grease or lube. It's just not compatible. It tends to break it up, and you get an X-Acto knife and scrape it off. Heat works, but heat would damage the plastic. And again, it's only crazy glue. It's not, some kind of supernatural powerful thing. But if you get it into the motor, that could be nasty. That happened to me once, but as a long time ago. But believe it or not, I was able to scrape it off. But you really don't want to go through that exercise. It's not too much fun. So what I'm going to do is put on the tiniest bit, drip. I mean tiny. Because this I like. This is a gel. So it doesn't run all over the place. See, there's another tiny little drop. Now I've got a few seconds. It doesn't dry immediately. Try to rotate it around. Tiniest bit. Just rotating it. I'm rotating it because if the cyanoacrylic did push back on the shaft, which it did on this one a little bit, and I wiped it off with this, I just don't want it to adhere. Now there's I don't want to put a drop of oil in there because it'll just kill it. It'll mean it will destroy the cyanoacrylic effect. So I don't fear the crazy glue. See, now there's a little bit on the shaft, but it's amazing that there is just that residual oil from inside already distorted the crazy glue that's on the shaft, and it came right off. It's just incompatible. So I'm hoping that enough of it survived internally in that in the socket in here to give it that grip that we need. Because that's all we really need, is a little grip. Because remember, we're not dealing with thousands of tons of torque here, or pressure, or whatever, Now the question is, reassembly. We've got these formidable, odd-looking pieces. These go over these and go into this. This is another oddball piece. I mean, but look at this thing. It looks like it's from the space shuttle. Look at the engineering that went into that. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, some engineer went to some serious schooling to come up with this, just so that we could have a toy train. Now, it's obviously there's supposed to be 4 screws, but I guess the original owner lost those screws eons ago. There's only 2. Now, you know what's also scary is she doesn't want to fit back in. Not a good feeling right now. Oh, there she goes. Now, I don't know if you could see it by hand, but it's spinning. So I know it's in the right spot. Is there any reason I shouldn't put the screws in now? Probably there is, but I can't think of what it is. So I'm going to put them in now. Just because it seems like a tight fit at the moment. But later, right when I'm about to put things, I'll either forget the screws, and guess what? It'll pop out. Now the whole time we're doing this, that cyanoacrylic is drying. And it's not a quick one. So this is harder than it should be. And this one's easy. It always bothers me when a screw doesn't go in easily. Usually you're doing something wrong. But let me check with these reading glasses. No, she looks in tight. Let's give it a little power because we want to verify that we've done this correctly. Because remember, this is the main gear train. If it's on too tight and it's putting pressure on the motor axle, well, nothing may work. And that wouldn't be good. Because what we really want is a great running locomotive. Power on this beautiful old throttle pack. I'm going to put one clip on here since it's so handy. Let me see if you could see that. She's spinning. I don't know if it catches it in the camera. It's kind of slow, isn't it? She's fine. Shut down power. Now, earlier on in the other video about this, I started taking this bolt off, forgetting that that's just a housing bolt that holds the open frame motor together. I quickly reversed course when I realized my error, and fortunately, I didn't cause any damage. Now, sometimes with model trains, when you haven't worked with certain pieces in a while, you forget certain basics. So it's like anything else, getting the rust off, and you start doing things and you realize why you didn't touch this or why you didn't do that. And it all comes back to you. So now what we want to do is put in these pieces, and we see that we have a couple of things going on. On this side is going to be these large bolts, and the other side these tiny bolts. So the question is, as we put this on, that looks pretty good and that looks so easy, but we really have to put these little pieces in too. Without these little pieces in, there's no power. So I'm going to try first to put it over this. See that? This is the coupler. This couples so that you can transfer power inside of here. Now I'm going to try to get that, wiggle and jiggle that in. And I'm going to cheat and rotate the motor a little bit. Yeah. See that? Now it's in. Okay. Now if I rotate the motor, I see everything is moving. I'm going to put the little screw in and not the big one yet, because the big one, the big screw, has to go to this copper bar, and we need to do that right side up. It'd be nice if I used the Phillips head on a Phillips head screw. You know, and if you don't really, you know, Phillips head has got the cross. I'm imagining it was a guy named Phillips who came up with that. But you never know. You ever hear the story of the guy who invented the diesel engine? I think they used to pronounce his name Diesel. And I think he died mysteriously, like in on a cruise ship, like he disappeared. But the diesel engine's named after him. So if you come up with something great or you disrupt an industry, remember, you'll have a bazillion enemies immediately. So if you do come up with something like a pill that you can put into a pail of water that makes your car run the equivalent of, 1,000 gallons of gasoline, you're either very rich or you have a big, big problem. So that's it'd be a nice problem to have, but only if you could deal with it. Probably you'd have to go to some other zillionaire guy and say, look, I'll give you a percentage, but you got to protect the idea. Because they're not going to knock off some well-known. You go to some guy like Elon Musk. Fascinating. Congratulations on that rocket launch. At least we're doing something again. I don't know, when I was a kid, I would think that by now we would have been all over the solar system, but it was not to be. Okay, now why is this one a little bit more... Ooh, I just found a good thing. We're going to go to our little droid and borrow a magnet off the droid, because this screw that doesn't want to cooperate is fortunately made of steel or iron. So now what I'll do is I put this little mini magnet on here, and now I have control over the screw. But I lost control of the train. Alright, well, like I said, patience is the key virtue here. You got patience, you can win. Just a matter of time. And skill. I mean, over time, you'll end up making less mistakes. Okay, she's in here. Let me align this now that I've got a nice magnetic pull on that screw. Look at that. The wheel is iron based too. That's kind of interesting. Alright. Now in theory she could run, except that we need to make this power trip connector. We have to put this back. See that copper piece goes up here?